All right. Good morning, everyone. Excuse me. It's a pleasure to see everyone here again today. It's a wonderful, nice, warm day. Which, with the exception of 1 year, seems to always happen for us up here. We're very fortunate. So, as we begin today's service, I want to acknowledge that we hold this service of remembrance and commemoration on Indigenous land. Liberty Cemetery and Petaluma in general sit on the unceded land that were once home to the Miwokma, the Ohlone, and the Ramaytush people. It was included in Session Tract 274 of Treaty M in 1851, part of the alphabet treaties that the government used to extinguish Indigenous title in the area. Yesterday, I was actually up here to attend the Veterans Day Assembly that the students at Liberty Cemetery were doing. And following the cemetery, one of the teachers came up to me to tell me how they had been using these recognition cards, which you can pick up over on the table over there. These are some of the items that we had sent down from Veterans Affairs Canada for the school to be able to use. The portrait on the outside is an Indigenous artist rendition of Chief Joseph Drever of the Mishtawashi Nahilewak First Nation in Saskatchewan. Apparently, he served as a sapper in the Canadian Expeditionary Forces in World War I and was eventually awarded a military medal for bravery. When at the age of almost 50, when World War II broke out, he actually re-enlisted and served as a Veteran Guard of Canada for POWs that were stationed in North America. Chief Drever was among 12,000 Indigenous volunteers that served in uniform during World War I, World War II, and the Korean War. And there have been countless more who have donned the Canadian Armed Forces uniform dating back to the War of 1812. Yesterday was actually Indigenous Veterans Day in Canada. So today, as we remember those who bravely answered our country's call to service, we should also pay particular remembrance to those Indigenous veterans whose land was stolen, were often robbed of their language and culture, but who still stepped forward, volunteered to fight for our freedom. Now I'd ask that our piper pipe in our colors. I'd ask that you remain standing for the national anthem for Canada, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Please be seated. I'd now call upon Comrade Charlie Martin, our acting chaplain for the day, for the opening prayer.
Before we proceed to the event which has brought us together, let us pause to think reverently of those of our comrades who by sea, by land, and in the air laid down their lives for their sovereign and country. Their sacrifice will ever inspire us to labor on to the end that those who survive and need our aid may be assured of assistance, and that the country in which we live, for which they died, may ever be worthy of the sacrifice they made.
Thank you, Comrade Martin. Next, I'd like to call upon Comrade Christopher Hogue, our Sergeant at Arms, to read the message from the Prime Minister.
It's November 11th, 2024. Dear friends, I'd like to extend my warmest greetings to my fellow Canadians marking Remembrance Day. Every year on November 11th, we don our poppies rather in solidarity to recognize every Canadian who has served and continues to serve our country in times of both war and peace. We observe 2 minutes of silence to acknowledge a death that we can never repay. This year, I have the privilege of commemorating the 80th anniversary of D-Day and the Battle of Normandy at Juno Beach. It was truly an honor to meet veterans who were among the over 14,000 Canadians who demonstrated tremendous bravery on June 6, 1944, and achieved a critical victory that changed the course of history. It is our duty to remember their stories and to never forget the sacrifices they made to ensure our collective freedom. Let us pay tribute to the brave heroes who have stepped forward to fight for justice and humanity with compassion, valor, and nobility. Doing so, we honor their service, preserve their legacy, and acknowledge our commitment to build a more peaceful world for all. Lest we forget. Sincerely, the Right Honorable Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada.
Thank you, Comrade Hogue. Now I'd ask you to rise for the following sequence. We will have the last post plate, followed by 2 minutes of silence, followed by the lament, followed by reveille. Thank Mr. Louvier, and I probably added a little too much French to that pronunciation from the Canadian now. As well as Comrade Martin. I'd now like to call upon Comrade Chris Hogue again for the act of remembrance.
Remembrance. They shall grow not old, as we who are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them. Thank you, Comrade Hope. Next, I'd like to call upon Comrade C.P. Krieger for a reading in Flanders Field. This will be followed by a response in Flanders Field and answer from one of our U.S. Naval Sea Cadet Corps Arkansas Division cadets.
Flanders Field by Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae. In Flanders Field, the poppies go between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks go bravely singing. I, Preston,
The larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Field. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw, torch, yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though Flanders grow, though poppies grow in Flanders Field.
Rest ye in peace, ye Flanders dead, the fight that ye so bravely led. We've taken up, and we will keep true faith with you who lie asleep. With each a cross marked his bed, and poppies blowing overhead. Where once his own light blood ran red. So let your rest be sweet and deep in Flanders Field. Fear not that ye have died for naught. The torch ye threw to us we caught. 10 million hands will hold it high, and freedom's light shall never die. We've learned the lesson that you taught in Flanders Field.
Next, I'd like to call upon once again our Arkansas Division Naval Sea Cadet Corps for the placing of the wreath. Thank you for all the words. Well, it's another year that we're up here again, and it's a lovely day that we've got. It seems that, as I said at the beginning, we tend to always get some wonderful weather here. Even, I guess, it was 3 years ago when it started to mist as we began. It cleared up by the time the service started, and the weather's cooperating so much this year that not even not swaying precariously right now. Of course. Keep fairly busy while I'm up here talking, so that'll be fun. It's great to see many familiar faces here. There's folks that we have that we see every year at every event. There's some that we have here today that we only see here at Liberty Cemetery, which is always a pleasure. There are some members that we're seeing for our first time today. And it's always a nice thing. At our last meeting, which was only a couple of days ago, we were talking about the challenges of being a Canadian Legion branch in the U.S. and the fact that our membership is spread out over 4 or 5 different states. And even those of us here in the Bay Area, if you take a line and sort of draw from if you generally the Bay Area, no, it's not. If you draw a line from him down to our southerly member that actually attends and then go eastward, you've got and if you were to try to drive it, it would take about 9 hours to get to those 3 points. So it's always great to see those familiar faces. And the reason I was thinking about this morning was if you listen to the Prime Minister's message, he talked about the 80th anniversary of D-Day and his attendance at Juno Beach. And I remember watching the coverage back in June when that happened. And one of the commentators there, he was belonging to one of the military historical groups. It might have been the War Museum or the Aviation Museum, or it might have been with the Legion. But he was talking about how one of the things that he noticed the most about this particular anniversary was the fact that at the 50th and the 60th and then the 70th and even the 75th, the number of D-Day veterans that were present were still significant. Whereas regardless if it was the British ceremony, the French ceremony, the American ceremony, or the Canadian ceremony, when you looked at the number of D-Day veterans that we had with us still, it was quite small. And he made the comment about, the next anniversary that would likely be celebrated there would be the 90th. And there's a good chance that there wouldn't be a single individual who fought during the Second World War that would still be around when that anniversary took place, which was 2034. As of this day last year, so as of Remembrance Day last year, there were still 9,267 Canadian World War II veterans that were alive. That number decreases in the dozens by the day. And they estimate that starting as of this March, it'll start decreasing by the hundreds every day for those that are left. And that really shouldn't be surprising to us, because if you think of a young 20-year-old who decided to volunteer in 1939, they would be 105 today if they were still with us. Even if you had somebody who lied about their age and were, say, 14, 15, or 16 years old and joined up in the final year of the war in 1945, those individuals would be 93 to 95 today. And as I think about that, I reflect on even our own branch. I joined this branch in 2016, and when I came here, we had a number of World War II veterans, folks like Ron and Ann Watkins, Gil Gorman, Andrew Bonifant, Marion Grabowski, Danny Mandel, and of course, we still have Joan Parr as our only surviving World War II veteran, who will be in approximately 2 months and 4 days, will be turning 101. And I think about the stories that I've heard from them and the stories that I've heard about them for the ones that I didn't get to know, because I only met Danny once. And for those of you that know him in the audience, and I know that there's probably about 5 or 6 folks here who do, from what I understand, he was quite a character. Danny was a British veteran. He was actually Churchill's bodyguard and was with him when they had the Tehran Conference in 1943, when Churchill met with Roosevelt and Stalin. And you can imagine the kind of stories that he must have had. And I say you can imagine because having only met him once, and it was actually at his 102nd birthday party, I didn't get to hear many of those stories. I remember attending the memorial service of Marion Grabowski, who was a commander in the Polish 1st Armored Tank Division. And the reason he was a member of the Canadian Legion was because Poland, its government, was in exile during the Second World War. So they were stationed basically in the UK. And the base that they were stationed on was the same base that the Canadian tank divisions were doing their training on in Scotland. And because of that, he developed an affinity for the Canadians. So when he moved to the Bay Area, he became a member of our branch. I'm sure, as a Polak in exile in Britain during the war, and from everything I've read about that particular division, the stance in which they fought the enemy, particularly because they had been overrun, the stories that he must have had, and that I know I never had the opportunity to hear. Our own Joan Parr, who's still with us. For those of you who don't know Joan's story, in 1942, she decided to join the war effort. They started with taking all of the women essentially down to Devon, which is about 3 hours outside of London in the southwest, and gave them all aptitude tests. And then depending upon what they showed an aptitude for, the Army basically decided where to send them. Joan got sent to Brantford initially for her training, which was up in the Leeds area, and then was stationed in London throughout the war. She was in Army communications, so she was essentially a switchboard operator, operating less than a mile from Buckingham Palace throughout the war, right up until 1946. As I think about these stories from our World War II vets, the vast majority of our veterans that we have now are Cold War era vets. And for those of you that don't know, today is the 35th anniversary of the falling of the Berlin Wall, which is generally accepted as the end of the Cold War. And I wonder how many of the stories that those individuals have from that particular line of service that we haven't captured, that we haven't asked, that we haven't taken time to remember, because oftentimes we focus upon the bigger conflicts, the World War, the Korea, the Vietnam, the Gulf War, Afghanistan. Up until 2003, Canada had participated in every single United States peacekeeping mission. And since 2003, we have still participated in over 85% of UN deployments. As you see the veterans here, and you'll note them because they have a veteran scroll underneath their Legion badge, be sure to ask them some of their stories, because so many of these things are being lost over the years. And it's one of those things that, particularly for our younger folks here, our cadets here, who come to visit us every single time we have a service, even when they're unplanned ones like our Battle of Britain was last year. And in all honesty, well, just do count on the numbers. Without them, we would be hard pressed to do pretty much anything that we would like to do. And so our ability to pass on those stories to all of you, and hopes that you won't have to develop these types of stories on your own. I think the wish that most of our veteran members in the audience would have for you. With that, I will ask our acting chaplain, Comrade Martin, to give the benediction.
Today, we remember and pay our respects to those comrades whose death we mourn, but whose spirit still lives on. May we strive to promote unity and spirit of comradeship, never forgetting the solemn obligation we have assumed as members of the Royal Canadian Legion, and remembering them. May we ever pray, Lord God of hosts, be with us yet, lest we forget.
Lest we forget. Thank you, Comrade Martin. As we close out today's ceremony, Comrade Martin is going to pipe our color guard out. I'd ask that you please stand for the retiring of the colors.